you have educated nation.
The outcome of our review of the same election are being finalized.
When you climb in the pulpit, what you say matters a lot.
Have responsibility to serve the people.
Thank you everyone for joining us here. This is Insight Today. We're live in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, here on Global Television. I'm Agmofwegbe. As part of the renewed hope agenda of President Bola Tinubu, Nigerians have seen a mix of initiatives being driven by the government to ensure that revenue generation initiatives are expanded. However, one of the challenges that has been highlighted over time is the policy structure of these otherwise laudable agenda. In recent times, media, especially online, has been inundated with stories and several speculations as to one very interesting move now being made by the government to ensure that it continues to scale its revenue generation. That is the Expatriates employment system. The challenge again is that there's not so much of clarity as to how this is going to work beyond the fact that we're seeing some level of projection as to how much of, if you like, blessing this could be in the final analysis if government pursues it to its logical conclusion. I'm joined by Chibuzo Okereke, public policy and legislative analyst, to help us cut through the noise and find sense in all of this. Chibuzo, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Great. So this whole thing is still very hazy. So for every person in this country who hears about it, the first question naturally is, how exactly does this work? Because it doesn't sound like the conventional revenue generation model that we know.
Well, I think that the first thing to highlight is the fact that there is an awakening of the ability of the government and the systems of government to tap into the structure or a system that can, help improve our fiscal status. Our fiscal condition right now is very, very troubling, and it worries everybody, because if you look at the economic indices and the conditions of the country, then I think it is right to commend any process or any initiative or policy design that is making effort to improve the revenue condition of the country. Interestingly, this particular expatriate revenue drive we are looking at is something that is prevalent in many other countries of the world, like Singapore, Switzerland, Cambodia, and a few of them. And Nigeria has become a hub, right? It has become a destination country for many expatriates. And also, you look at the situation whereby the condition of the local citizens and that of the expatriates, you discover there is a huge gap in their personal economy, right? And how the economic condition affect them. So what is going on now is government saying, oh yeah, we have over 200,000 foreigners working across all sectors. Remember that in the 70s we had indigenization policy that seek to, articulate the economy of the country, putting certain industries in the hands of the locals and that of the foreigners. Today in Nigeria, we have an unwritten rule whereby everyone that has come into the country to do all kinds of business, which of course there is a drive for foreign direct investment, there is a drive for businesses to be located there. But you must also protect the local economy and protect the citizens of the country. And to do this, you need to adequately present a fair condition that balances both parties. And that is why I think it is fit and proper that we are now considering a situation whereby expatriates that are working in certain sectors of the economy must be captured in the revenue stream. Speak to Nigerians in China, in India, in the UK, in the US. they will tell you life here is productivity. Your life depends on how productive you are. If you are not productive, you have some gaps. If you're very productive, the government is going to gain maximally from your contribution to the GDP and the economy. If you set up a company right now in China, you're going to have some expatriates at the management level, but the locals will occupy the lower cadre, right? In Nigeria, for instance, that is not happening. And this is so you have people, jobs that under the local content art arrangement or even presidential orders on local content that Nigerians are supposed to do, foreigners are doing it. In fact, I think in Palestine or Pakistan, if you are recruiting somebody if you are recruiting employees from their country to Canada or US, they have a fee per person. In Nigeria, we even have foreign medical organizations coming to conduct recruitment here and take our people, and everybody just goes. And remember that our educational system is subsidized. So the country, we have not been managing this process properly. And that is why we should look at this policy as a way of showing up government revenue. And it's critical because if you choose to bring in expatriates to do the job that locals ordinarily should be able to do, then get ready to be captured into the revenue net of the government. Yeah.
I mean, we have to admit that this all sounds very beautiful. But then the irony is, why aren't we hearing so much about it from government quarters?
Well, that is in the works. Our job, as policy analysts and experts, is to actually examine some of these proposals. I think that also government should communicate better, right? This is something new, although it's existing in other parts of the world, but I think that even the expatriate will appreciate the fact that this is happening for a number of reasons. A lot of things cause disaffection between host communities and foreigners who are working with them. And that is that perception that the presence of these people is actually affecting our own personal economy. But there could be a trade-off with this kind of policy, whereby the revenue generated from them is not used to tackle other critical aspects of our national economy that will now improve the standard of living of the ordinary citizens who hitherto thought that the presence of these guys have dislodged us from our economic opportunities. Yeah.
Every time Nigeria rolls out an initiative or a policy like this, at some point it gets faulted. I mean, even from sometimes people in the government. In an ideal situation, what are some critical measures and, if you like, frameworks that should be on the ground prior to rolling out full-fledged?
Well, let me, just a few days ago, the Minister of Aviation stated that the Nigeria Airspace Project has a fundamental, foundational problem. And he identified two things that could pass as economic sabotage of the country. Number one is that the agreement for that project with the Kenyan Airways, with Ethiopian Airways rather,
right,
waived tax for them for a whole 5 years, and also granted them another leave to appoint the entire management structure of the company. And then those ones stated that they will crash the fare. And what does that mean? You are going to collapse the local operators, and you become a monopoly. And when you become a monopoly, you can increase the fare, and nobody will question you because you are the one providing all the stuff. So how did we get there where we abandon our local content laws, right, and arrangement, and grant such level of waiver to a foreign company, knowing very well that it will impact, our people? Also, when a review was done on the Chinese loan agreement on the railway modernization of the country with the Chinese Exim Bank, you know that China has state status on their companies. If you look at that agreement, the agreement provided that all the technology and quality shall be determined and deployed by China. Even the employment of people working on those modernization projects, we had more Chinese people doing critical jobs that even our own local content and presidential executive order on local content, had provided for to protect the country. I say this to tell you that this, for me, has been long overdue. But again, in policy design, you need a lot of trade-off, you need a lot of multi-stakeholder engagement, you need a lot of system building, right? And one of the things I believe should be done is to have a legislative framework around this. Because when policies don't have force of law, it is difficult for it to germinate and be sustainable. And the reason is that by way of emotion or other influences, those policies could be altered if it's just administrative pronouncement. But if it's a policy that has a legal framework, before you alter aspect of it, you have to also go through that same process. So in driving this, legal framework is very important, multi-stakeholder engagement is very important, and the adequate explanation. And of course, assurance that these revenues that will be generated will be adequately applied to tackle critical national infrastructure issues, socio-economic and welfare of citizens. Yeah.
Yeah, this is getting really interesting, Chibuzo, I must admit. But we're going on a quick break, everyone. When we return, we'll stretch the conversation a bit further. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the program, everyone. So I was just going to ask you something. I mean, you talked about emotions and a few other external influences shaping some certain moves by governments. Now, two things real quick. The first is on the 29th of May, when President Bola Tinubu was being sworn in. I mean, just right in the middle of his inaugural speech, he said subsidy is gone. And about 7 or so months down the line, see where Nigeria is with regards to the accompanying hardship that came with that pronouncement, which experts like yourself have argued that it's not a policy in the real sense of the word. This kind of move that the government is making, some people will say is a knee-jerk reaction to the economic situation that Nigeria is dealing with at the moment. Add to that the fact that in the final analysis, it is a combination of political appointees and career civil servants that would drive these. So what are the obstacles?
Well, first, I think that, one, we need to, analyze it and look deeper into how the structure of the whole thing will work. If you look at the president pronouncement and all that, on that aspect, I would say that the government probably need to communicate more and they communicate better. This is important, and I say this because it's not the opposition parties that exist in Nigeria. There are citizens of Nigeria who demand good governance, accountability from the government. So when you speak as a government, you are not just speaking to opposition or imagine if you say the truth, what the opposition is going to use it to do, but also that there are citizens who want to hear from a legitimate government, constitutional government that is in power, right? Who wants you to explain to them what you're doing and how, and understand how what you're doing affect them. That is on one hand. So I think on the subsidy, the FS problem is actually what is imparting on supposed gain from the subsidy, and That could be explained to citizens to understand, and then measures that are being taken, like the policy part we have seen from the CBN governor and all that. What is going to yield the timelines and what have you. So on that, I would say government need to speak more, communicate better to citizens. In terms of the operational feasibility of this new initiative, on the political feasibility, I can tell you that it is because of the kind of agencies like the Ministry of Interior working with the
Customs,
customs
Ministry
and
of
even Ministry of Finance
Budget,
and
national
that
planning.
of immigration, right? These guys are critical stakeholders in government. So the political backing and feasibility is solid. If you look at the operational, which is what you asked me, the structure and the civil service system that will deliver it, it is about with the time we tell ourselves the truth. Is that no matter the system, no matter the institution you put in place, the human character and the human integrity, it is what is needed to drive it. And the greatest element in a country's development is the hope that the citizens have that something will get better. If you are a civil servant in the immigration anywhere, and this policy is on, because today I can tell you, there are people issuing fake documents to chefs from different countries who are working in Nigeria without being properly permitted to work here. For every person you granted illegal stay or work permit in the country, you have dislodged a legitimate citizen of the opportunity to enjoy the economic benefit of available in the country ascribed in the Constitution. So it's also a call to them that systems and structure cannot work without their sincerity of purpose and integrity as custodians of government policy, to make sure that if the government said we want to show up revenue and bringing in expatriates into our revenue net is critical, nobody should sabotage that kind of process, because it will amount to economic sabotage, which the laws frown at, and it has grave consequences. And for Christ's sake, for how long would you prefer to sabotage your own system for the benefit of another person? Yes, this is a global community, but again, every country is a sovereign state. There are rules and regulations governing that country, and people have taken oath to serve, to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law in the country. So I think that the operational mechanisms should be up and running, and they should deliver this policy with sincerity of people, because it will help the country. It will help to address unemployment issues. It will help to address the issue of corruption, because when government has more capacity to deliver on their mandate, then people are able to have hope in the country. Yeah.
You talked about the need to have policy framework a while ago, I mean, just before we hit a break. And if you look at all of the stories, I mean, the news we're hearing, things we're reading about these expatriates' employment or engagement, you realize that there's some sort of medium, long-term elements, 10 years, 20 years kind of projections in it. This is a country that's not, that doesn't particularly have a reputation for long-term projections. One government comes in, disrupts the whole process, starts everything afresh. So there's always that so-called policy somersaults and things like that. To what extent could that also pose a challenge to this?
Well, one thing about new policy is that if you don't test it, you may not know the challenges.
So this is essentially experimental?
No. Well, it's been thought through, but the details need to be out, so that we can also go deeper into the elements associated with it. But what is clear is that there is a revenue projection of over $2 billion that the country can gain from this process.
On an annual basis?
On an annual basis. So that already, is clear. And if that is clear, why are we shying away from pursuing such initiative? All we need to do is to tie the knots around critical trade-off that could affect. Because for whatever policy you go into, there must be a trade-off between what is there before or what is able to combat it. But if you talk about policy somersault, I think that policy in itself has dynamic character, right? Is dynamic in nature, and it can change in terms of some of the elements around it. But fundamentally, the objective, right, if it's not met, the issue of policy abortion may not happen except there is a critical governance issue that tend to affect it. But in this respect, Nigeria, you have to know, has a lot of potentials. People as foreigners and expatriates, they have seen this huge potential. And if you see, when you have opportunities in your country and you don't do anything about harnessing it, you will be the one to lose. And that is why you start see the host communities becoming, very, antagonous to the people, to the foreigners and water, because ordinarily they feel that these people are taking away something. And also the character of the people itself. You must demand what you have locally, right? You must demand the skills that is in your country. However, remember that this policy design is a situation where this is the rule. If you decide not to follow this rule, this is the compensation in form of tax that you are going to pay. And the country also, especially the managers of the policy, have to also look at a situation where these foreigners may not begin to profile people that are doing work that are supposed to be captured under this revenue net as diplomats. Because you see, that is why when you put out the policy, you will see the potential and the challenges that could come. Because the tendency to profile certain people who are already here to become diplomats and fall under the exemption category could be there.
To the detriment of Nigeria.
To the detriment of, so we need to have a robust operational mechanism, and we need to have sincerity of heart and national patriotism, so that somebody that's supposed to pay us maybe $100,000 a company or so in a year, you don't take $20,000 and allow the thing to go through. And that is an area we need to deal with in pushing out this policy. Yeah.
I know you've mentioned some of the challenges that we should be concerned about, but in 2 minutes, I mean, for the most part, it appears we are so engrossed with what we could realize from this in terms of the fiscal advantage that it brings to us. What are some factors we should be concerned about that we need to address as quickly as possible going into full-fledged implementation?
Well, some of those factors are how we engage. We need to, this has been in the works, it needs to be out there. Critical stakeholders need to be engaged so that any area of concern they have, policy is about trade-off. No policy can just come and then function all through without any kind of trade-off, in whatever means, whether political, operational, environmental, or what have you. So that engagement with the multi-stakeholder is very important, because this is something they are not used to, right? But it is now important. And let me say also, this is not just about Nigeria addressing fiscal challenges. This is also what is critical for a destination country with huge economic opportunities and markets that a lot of foreigners are now interested in, including providing skills that are available here. You cannot watch as a government or a country whereby the skills that are available in your country are taken over completely by expatriates. And this is what, if you don't start it now, then you are already late by yesterday. And this is important because people will continue to come into, as they see. Look at the amount of restaurants and chefs that companies are using. Look at the construction companies. Look at the manufacturing foreign companies in Nigeria. And look at the number of staff they have, the designation of the staff, and the number of people that have been profiled as expatriates there. Also look at even project that we do as a country and look at the disparity between what we pay to expatriates and what we pay to the locals. And we all live in the same global economy, impacted by the same economic conditions, and even worse. If you look at the global south, they have more challenges than the global north. So this is something that needs to be done, and we already, there are statistics as to that we have over 200,000 of expatriates working in the country. There are statistics that we are likely to be having over $2 billion annually. And don't forget also that if this money is judicially applied, it will even improve the economic condition of their own market forces within the country.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. Thank you so very much, Chibuzo Kereke, public policy and legislative analyst, for coming to help us advance this insight on the program today. We appreciate that. Yeah. And that's a wrap on Insights today here on Global Television. I'm Agumofwegbe. We do appreciate you watching. I'll see you again.
Ask how, why, when, and why it must be immediate.
Educate a woman, you have educated a nation.
The outcome of a review of the same election are being finalized.
When you climb in the pulpit, what you say matters a lot.
Have responsibility to serve the people.